Schneider skinks are some of the most underrated species on the entire planet. Why do I look like a jungle in front of a jungle? Here, 1 second. Okay, that's better. This is a Schneider skink, one of the most underrated species on the entire planet. So darn cute, and today I'm going to tell you how to take care of them. My name's Adam, this is Bonnie, you're watching Wickens Wicked Reptiles, stick around. Now normally you're gonna see me put like diamond on my shoulder here. I'm not sure how well that's gonna work with this guy because they are a little bit jumpier. These are Schneider skinks, or sometimes called Berber skinks, although they're not actually the same, even though used interchangeably. More on that later. These guys are from parts of Africa and parts of Asia. Their claws feel way different than a bearded dragon. They're diurnal, and they are terrestrial, mostly. So that is the general wrap up here. So let's get into the care guide. And before we do, just a disclaimer, I always say this, it's a care guide, not a manual. Do as I say or your skink will die. None of them are. Use common sense and let's just have fun with it. All right, let's start. With any animal, the first thing you're gonna need to know, or want to know probably, is size. How big do these animals get? Well, the good news is, not that big. Well, for some of us. For me, I like the size that these guys are. They're gonna be around 12, 13 on the low side inches we're talking about here, all the way up to say 18, some people say even 20 inches. So not super big, but also not small. I would say in terms of skinks, they are medium sized. Now there are more slender skink than other skinks you've seen on the channel, like blue tongues and things like that. And also, rhymes with skinks, and things like that, species similar to that. These guys are gonna be thinner, and most of their body is actually because of their tail. So tickly, so tickly. Believe it or not, these are not arboreal skinks, but this is the funniest thing that we've done on the channel, so let's just keep rolling. The sound it makes on a bald scalp is absolutely ridiculous. Like I can hear it inside my head. Okay, where were we? These guys do have long tails, which account for a large part of their body, but they do snap off. In sections, they can snap off. So not just at the base, but in the middle. And this guy actually has a regrown tail. So they do regrow. And unlike things like, say, leopard geckos, these, when their tails regrow, they look very normal, just a little bit discolored, but usually the same shape as when they had the tail in the first place. Now, the next thing I think is enclosure size in terms of importance, just simply because how big of an enclosure do you need for these guys? How big of a space in your home is a Schneider skink or two of them going to take? Because they actually do really well in pairs or in communal groups, as long as you have the right size enclosure, of course. So let's go over the size and what you need inside. I personally think that the standard, which is a 20 gallon long, it works. It definitely works for one, but you guys know me if you watch a channel, I like bigger enclosures for animals, bigger than suggested. So 20s work for sure, but I think that a 40 would probably be better for one, and if you have two like I do, you could keep it in something like, I don't know, a 36 by 18, that sort of thing. The height doesn't really matter. A foot or a foot and a half would work. So this is kind of equivalent to about 50 gallons if you go 18 inches tall, but the floor space is gonna be the same regardless of height, and they're not gonna use a ton of it, although mine use a little bit. They climb on branches, they get about 6 inches up, and then they fall down into the soft substrate like little goofy goos that they are. So that's what I do, is I keep mine in an enclosure. It's an Exoterra front opening. Any front opening works, or even one that you have to take the lid off and go through the top. It doesn't really matter, as long as it's big enough. So I use one that's 36 inches long by 18 inches deep by a foot high. And I think in future, I'm going to upgrade them to a 120 gallon, which is a 4x2x2, maybe give them something a little bit taller to climb up on and just see how they react. Part of owning reptiles, the fun part, is observing what they do and how they react to their environment. So I'm gonna try that. But let's just say 40 gallon for a pair. And they do well in pairs, so I recommend if you're going to have a pair, give a bigger enclosure than for one. Okay, what do you need inside? Well, you wanna start with substrate. That's what's on the ground. The substrate that I use for a lot of reptiles, especially ones that might burrow a bit, which these guys definitely will, is a substrate that is mixed basically 50-50 sand and dried eco-earth. Although you could add a little bit of sphagnum moss in there, or you could add a little bit of soil, like a topsoil. The idea is you want it to be dry, but you don't want it to collapse on them when they make burrows. So that's why I use a play sand play sand always. Don't use a builder grade sand, that could cause impaction. And I use the coconut core, and I just mix it together. And that's basically it. This holds burrows really well, and they definitely dig burrows all over the place under everything. They'll just kind of like pop out of the sand with their little dirt hats. It is so cute, it is so adorable. Also, there's some rather obvious stuff. We'll get to the lighting in a second, but give them something to enrich themselves. Something to climb up, climb over, not super high. They don't need it super high, but maybe like a log that's kind of leaning against a log that's a hide, because you want to give them hides. Although they're gonna burrow, and they're gonna burrow under their basking platform, you're gonna wanna give them just regular hides also. Makes them feel super secure, and a secure animal is usually a happy animal and one that isn't stressed out. And an animal that isn't stressed out, well, they're more handleable most of the time. So what I do is I've just got a few things. I've got this basking platform, which you'll need. You put that under the basking light. We'll get to lighting in a sec. And that's gonna get rather warm on the top, and it's gonna hold heat, so when they're underneath it, it's gonna feel warm to them as well. And that's why you need a substrate that will hold and not just collapse, because you don't want a rock collapsing on your skink. Pancake skinks are less fun than Schneider skinks. Next, you want a water bowl. I always recommend a water bowl big enough for the animal to get in, although these guys aren't really gonna be swimming or getting in their water, really. I just give them something that isn't deep enough that they're gonna drown in it, but also isn't so shallow I'm gonna have to replace the water every 5 minutes. So give them something like this. I think it works perfect. Replace the water every day or every other day, and you're A-okay. I'm a rapper now, that rhymed. The last two things, which seem so obvious I almost forgot to write them down, is a tight fitting lid. So whatever enclosure you use, if it is just a regular fish tank that you have to take the top off of, make sure it's tight fitting. They're not escape artists in the same way as Snake is, but they do, like my guys, they can climb, they can reach like the top of the mesh on the top of their enclosure from the perches I give them to climb on, and they'll like grab onto it and hold onto it like Spider-Man and then fall down. So just make sure there's no gaps, make sure it is completely sealed off, and that way you're not gonna have an escaped skink, because I imagine they'd be hard to find. And lastly, use a thermometer hygrometer, and the one that I use is just this Govee one. They're not a sponsor of this video, I just personally stand behind this one. It syncs to your phone, so you know all the time what the temperature is. It sends you notifications if you want, that sort of thing, and you just keep the temperature range. Well, we're gonna get to that next, I think. Have you ever been cleaning your snake rack and thought, you know what would make this better? Maybe if I look like a jungle. Or maybe a tropical floral arrangement. I know I think that all the time. At the end of the day, jokes aside, if you want to feel good, you gotta look good. And looking good comes at a small price. Into the AM, our sponsor for today's video, has a promotion running right now. If you want to get 3 basic tees, it's only $45. Or if you want super awesome graphic tees like this one here, or this one here, they're 3 for $60 right now, and you get an extra 10% off if you go to the link below, intotheam.com/WWR. Into the AM is one of my favorite clothing brands. You see me wear their shirts all the time in the videos. Thank you very much, Into the AM. I recommend you go try out their products. Heat, humidity, and lighting is the next thing. Now this is important because, well, it's an ectotherm. Skinks are ectotherms like most reptiles. So with these guys, you need to keep the heat proper because they can't create their own like we can. And what's proper for these guys, it's kind of debated. This species isn't super common, and because of that, there's a lot of information that kind of varies. But from what I gather and from my experience with them, I recommend cool end somewhere around like high 70s, low 80s. I keep mine right about 80 degrees. And then on the warm side, because you do want a temperature gradient, you want the warm side and then you want a cool side. And the temperature difference is only gonna be about 10 to maybe 15 degrees. So on my warm side, I keep it right around 90. 85 to 90 is generally where you want to go, and that's what works for me. Now the basking spot, what I recommend is use a rock underneath the basking bulb, and that way it keeps that heat, it catches that heat, and it's going to warm up warmer than the air. And what I do is I have it right about, I would say 10-ish inches below the 50-watt basking bulb, which I just buy a halogen from the dollar store, by the way. And this temperature of the rock is going to be right about 95 to 110 degrees, and it warms up during the day. And this is where most people recommend. Most people recommend about 105. If it gets to about 110, you're gonna be okay. If you put your hand on it and it's not burning you, you're gonna be fine. fine. And for most of the day, it stays right around 105. So again, this is a care guide. If your basking spot gets to 111, they don't just spontaneously combust. It's moving around my head again. Bonnie. I don't wish premature baldness on anybody, but the feeling of a skink on your head is something else. We're talking about how they're terrestrial. She dropped down into my lap and I put her back on my shoulder, and then now, let's move on. Okay, Bonnie's gonna take a little break here and we'll get to humidity, which is widely debated, by the way. Humidity is something that if you read about these guys, you're gonna see as low as 20 and you're gonna see as high as 60. So where do you go? Well, in the middle is where I've went, because when I was new to these skinks, I decided, well, let's kind of split the difference here. And it's worked for me. So what I do, my temperature rate, or my humidity, it's right behind the camera, is 30%. Now I can tell the 24-hour high and low because of that thermometer, hygrometer that I told you. So mine goes as low as about 27% and as high at night as 42, sometimes 45%. So it depends on your area where you live, but if you're gonna use a basking bulb, which you need to anyway, you're gonna have the air dry out around it. So you'll probably have a humidity gradient as well. And the humidity is going to be a lot more down below the surface of the substrate. So I recommend try to shoot for 30. Basically. Now lighting is very important because these animals do need UVB light. We've already kind of beat to death the heat light. You're gonna need a basking light, use a halogen, use one from the dollar store, use one from a hardware store, use one that is made for reptiles, whatever. As long as you have a UVB light as well. I recommend using a tubular UVB that is the entire length of the enclosure, which is what I do. I use a Zoomed one that's one of these T5 bulbs. It is a 12.0, although is it? Or is it a 5.0? No, it's a 10.0, actually. So there's a debate on this as well. It's always debate in the community. Now, these guys are partly desert dwelling, right? They're part of grasslands and then rocky outcrops, sort of, why am I stuttering through everything? Semi-arid environments as well. You guys saw the map of where they're from. So I use a 10.0 and it works really well. I think it stimulates their behavior quite a bit. Also use a meter to gauge how much is actually going down where they're going to be, which is on the surface of the substrate. And most importantly, change the UVB light every 6 to 12 months. Again, if you have the option to get a solometer, or I always pronounce it wrong, that's why I just call it a meter. If you get a chance to get a meter, just read it, check every 3 months, and then once it's not producing the UVB that they need anymore, just switch out the bulb. The diet is something that I always look for in a reptile and kind of decide based on this and many other factors if it's for me. Because I personally like omnivores. They're fun to feed. I have a bunch of species that are omnivores, and the part that I like is that, well, you feed crickets on this day and mealworms on this day, and on this day you feed a salad, because that's what they're gonna eat. Even these guys can eat pinky mice sometimes. So I've never tried with mine, but all the care guides I read and the people that I've talked to have been breeding them forever, or keeping them forever, because breeding them is actually very difficult in captivity. They all feed them pinkies, especially once they're older, and it works for them. Now, what I feed as a staple are things like crickets. You could feed dubia roaches if they're legal where you are. They're not where I am. Canada, shame on you. Black soldier fly larvae is another thing I feed all the time. Now, this is a underrated feeder insect, I think. It's very high. And anyway, there's a link below. Use code WWR at the Grub Terror website when you hit the link for 10% off your order, and it gets shipped right to your door. Anyway, I always use a salad mix as well. Now I buy a spring mix that just has things like arugula and Swiss chard and things like that inside of it, and I'll just rip it up with my hands. But also I'll go out and buy collard greens, I'll buy dandelion greens, endives, watercress, things like that, and I grow red Swiss chard in my garden. So just have a good mix, don't feed citrus, stuff like that. Of course, do your research beyond this video before you get anything. These care guides are fun, but research the heck out of anything you're gonna get. And once you've done that and you get one and you're trying to feed it salad and it won't eat it, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Some care guides will even call these guys insectivores, and they're only gonna eat plants because the insects are on the plants. I personally don't believe this. I think that they are omnivores, and I think that it might be just a challenge to get them to eat greens because, I mean, bugs probably taste better and they're more fun to chase down and things like that. So if you put in things like, say, mealworms or the Grubterra, the black soldier fly larva, with the salad, they're gonna get the salad in them and it kind of weans them onto it. And that's what I've done with things like Jewel Lacertas and Bearded Dragons, and it works, and it's also worked with my Schneider skinks. And then just briefly, do lots of research on supplementation. I do calcium every other feeding, and I do D3 twice a week. It's similar to things like Bearded Dragons and things like that, but not exactly the same. Again, research before you get any species. Okay, and that was a perfect segue into behavior. Here, I'll put you, yeah, you can climb back up my arm here. I know you're gonna climb right back up on my head. I can't even pretend that I'm not laughing. Like, these guys are so funny. They're like the clowns of the reptile world, in my opinion. I have never seen an animal so fun to just watch out of the corner of my eye. Now, I have these guys in quarantine in this room with a few other animals I got at the exact same time. But when they're ready, which they kind of are already, they're more than ready to not be a quarantine animal and go into the main reptile room, I'm probably not gonna put them down there. I'm probably gonna keep them in my office just because I edit right here, right beside the camera here. This is my desk. This is my kind of setup right there. And I think that it's just actually more fun. Here, I'll put this back here, there we go. It's more fun to have them in here to watch. I hear them like climbing on the screen over the corner of my eye. How do you hear something out of the corner of your eye? I hear it and I can see them out of the corner of my eye, and it is just so much fun to watch. No, now they do jump, but they're not the most accurate jumpers, so mine just fell out. Come on. Onto the tree behind me here. It's an iguana now. So as far as behavior goes, I mean, watch for that tail. I guess that's a behavior. They do drop it. You'd really have to yank on it for that to happen, by the way. They're very reluctant to, but it can happen, so be wary of that. They will try to climb, but they're not the best climbers, so don't let them like climb a tree. It's not gonna end well. Either you're not gonna be able to get them down, or they're gonna fall down and hurt themselves. But if you have something that's a foot or 18 inches off the ground and you have an appropriate substrate, I can't even express to you the tickliness of the claws on my head. I have filmed, this is episode like 263 or something. I've never had more fun handling an animal. Like, I'm not even joking. This has taken so long and it's gonna take forever to edit. But if you want an animal that is actually fun and interactive, isn't just gonna sit there like a bump on a log, like a diamond, then you gotta get a Schneider skink. Their behavior is amazing and they're super handleable. I am not worried at all about this thing biting me, knock on wood. It's not even crossing my mind. Even with they're kind of climbing up my ear and I have post-traumatic stress from diamond biting my ear every episode, I'm not even thinking about it. I'm just thinking about how fun it is and weird it feels for them to climb on me. So I don't know, their claws are not sharp, they're not gonna hurt you. Even if they do bite you, it would probably suck, but it's not gonna be like the end of the world. You're not going for stitches or anything like that. Okay, you guys get it. These guys are the best. They're so underrated. This has been a weird episode. It's been a lot of interruptions. I hope it all made sense. What do you think about Schneider's? Oh, actually, you know what? We have got one more category. Sorry. Price and availability. I'll make it quick. Kind of hard to find. There's only 3 of them on Morph Market, but the most expensive one is $60. So if you can find one, buy it. Buy it if you've done your research and you're ready. Obviously, of course. But if you've done your research and you're ready and you see one, pull the trigger, they're gonna go fast. I promise you. These guys are going to jump in popularity, not just because of videos like this, but because people are gonna find out. Someone's gonna find out, someone who has a much larger audience is going to get one and blow these guys up. Because once you get one, you're gonna tell all your friends. These are the most underrated species I have ever had. Above Dumeral's boas, above Antaresia, there is not a candle to be held against these guys. They are, number one, clumsy. They're little clowns. He's on the camera now. You can't be on the... Okay, for real now. Please hit like and subscribe. I really appreciate it, and so would Bonnie, 100%. Oh, and by the way, yes, Bonnie and Clyde are my pair, and they came with a name, but I was gonna name them that anyway. Thank you so much for watching this far. I appreciate you subscribing and liking and leaving a comment for the algorithm to let people know about Schneider skinks. Let's get the message out there. Let's get it out there. These guys deserve to be known more. So if you interact with the video, it gets pushed out to more people, and Schneider skinks get the love they deserve. As always, a special thank you to the Patreon supporters who knew about these guys months before I put them on the channel, and they've got crazy pictures of them as well. So for as little as $1 a month, you can see things like that, this brand new project that I just made. Here's a teaser, you can know what's in it, discounts on the merch, videos early, and much, much more. I have to put this guy back. I am like out of breath. I feel like I'm handling a mini reticulated python, just like so crazy and rambunctious. Because I do videos twice a week, that means that I'll see you on Monday. Or Thursday, actually.